Hey everyone, Tim Higgins with AI Solutions. So hopefully we're going to do another video this morning on, or at least morning for me, on some really cool buzzwords going around right now. One of them being Docker. I'm pretty sure you all have heard of that. We'll cover what it is, why you would want to use it, and hopefully throw some Docker containers together. And then we'll go into microservices, very short, if I can spell that. I think that's right. What it means. And truthfully, is microservices really is a new term to an old meaning. And then we'll get into the really cool word of, which may look on spelling this one, Kubernetes, what it actually is. Because I really had a misleading on that one as well when I first heard about it. So let's get started. Now, with Docker really is, well, let's think about the past, right? So I'm a software engineer if you're watching my other videos. And in the older days, you had an app, right? Usually apps were 2 tiers when they first came out, right? Maybe 1 tier, which means they had a front end and just some code, right? And then they grew to what we call 3 tiers, and now they grew into what's called a multi-tier, okay? And what that means is just multi-tier. And what that means is, let's just say meaning. What that means is just that it has many different layers, right? Now, so when you think about a company, when a company had this, they usually had 1 app per server, okay? And I apologize about me typing here, but this is, I don't do PowerPoint unless I have to, and this is kind of a way to talk through it, right? And it puts it in more realistic terms. So besides just reading off of a PowerPoint or a PDF. But, so if you think about in the older days, we had 1 app per server, and it really wasn't that long ago. And then servers got really costly. Right. So if I had multiple apps, that's 2 tier, I might have 2 servers. Okay. And back then, if you think about the RAID 5s and things like that, the servers were very expensive. I can't remember off the top of my head, but Dell Servers was obviously one of the brands, and you know they had their RAID 5s, and the RAID really was only like 2 gigs. Right. I remember doing a project for Mitsubishi back a while back, maybe late 80s, and we were trying to rush the server from crashing by rebuilding the application in VB. But that's another video for that. But with seeing that, this got very costly. It got manageable. It got costly. Even then when it moved to 2, 3 tiers or more, not too long ago, we still were buying servers, right? And servers, when you think of servers, what costs on a server is really the hardware. That's all you're buying because you're providing the software, right? Because you're building the application. But not just that, you do have software that you need, the OS. And if you ever try to just go and buy Windows Server, it's very costly. So then if I have, 10 servers, and we're still back in 80s, right? Maybe moving into the 90s. If I had 10 servers, I still had to buy OS for each one of those. And then I had to buy hardware for each one of those. And then I had to maintain each one of those. So I had to buy a team of infrastructures, right, to maintain those. And the cost just got ridiculous. And then we moved into more what we call server farms, right? And a server farm really is just a group of servers. Now, again, this got very costly. And then we came out, I can't think who it was, but then we moved into the VM world. Now, the VM world really resolved a lot of these issues because we no longer needed to buy these physical hard servers to run all this different stuff. Now we can buy less servers to run the applications. But the one misleading thing is you still had to maintain the hardware. What a VM is really it looks at the hardware of your device, right? We'll call it a device, but we'll just call it server. And it takes chunks of it. Okay. If I can spell that. And it takes chunks of your hardware. So you still have to have this massive amount of hardware. Now the problem is, do you get more than you need? Who maintains it, right? And all that good stuff. So let's put that to test. So if I look at HyperV for Windows, now you have to have, I think it's Windows Professional. Now ignore this, please. We'll come back to this in a minute. But whenever you run HyperV, I'm on Windows 10, you have to have something better than the Home Edition to get HyperV. And to do that, let's go ahead and talk about that real quick. If you go to Add and Remove Programs, and because we're going to talk about installing Docker as well, and in case you've noticed, that's where I'm going. If we go to Turn On Features, now I have the latest and greatest, and I also use Professional. I have containers. Go ahead and check that. You're going to want that. But you also want to go down and make sure HyperV is checked. Okay. And that's pretty much all you have to do. And then we'll install it for you. If you do run into a problem saying that your laptop is not virtual, I think it's virtual prepared or something, it has to be changed in the BIOS. Now, be very careful with that. I'm not even going to talk about that. If you run into that issue, let Google help you. But if I go here and if I say, let's create a new virtual machine, let's go next. We'll just call it some demo. Okay. Now, I want to store it someplace different, so I'll know to look for it and delete it. Okay. Delete VM. All right. Now, if you look here, it wants to know about, okay, well, what can we start using for your hardware? Well, how much memory are you going to take from my physical memory? Let's just say 6 gig. And notice it says use dynamic memory as well. Well, what is that actually telling me? Well, it's telling me it's using my memory from my box. Now, here, I didn't set up a switch. You'd have to go over here and set up a virtual switch. But let's just pick default. When you set up a virtual switch, it knows what physical net card it wants to use. Now here it wants to know about my hard drive. Well, yeah, that's fine. But let's go ahead and just say use 5 gig. Well, I don't think I can do that. I have a terabyte. So we'll say, you know what, I do, but I have other stuff on here. So let's use, you know what, fine. Let's just see what happens. Next. Now it wants to know about my operating system. Now I'll install this later because I don't really have one. And then I'm just going to say next and finish. So what this is doing is creating a virtual machine based off of my hardware. So if I go look at the settings here, it's using my BIOS. It's using my memory. Okay. It knows my NIC card. And not here because I didn't set it up on the virtual network, but that's fine. The processor, how much processor threads is it going to use for my processor? So that's how a virtual machine works. So you still have to go ahead and just so you know what I'm saying, if I do the virtual switch and I just say create an external switch, that's fine. And then if I go here, it knows my NIC card. Okay, that's how that works. So let's go ahead and delete this. Now, Docker came along and said, what if we tried something different? It takes a few seconds for it to delete. Well, let's talk about the VM first. So I have a server, right? On top of the server, I have a couple of VMs. Okay. Now, on top of the VMs, I have hardware. So let's have disk. Let's have CPU. And let's have memory. And then down here, we'll have CPU, disk, memory, and network. Okay, those are usually the top 4. And all that is running on a server. Now, if I need that more, I have to either add more server or I have to add more of these. Now, not too bad in a way, if you think about it, but now I have to add my apps. Okay, so app 1, app 2, app 3, and app 4. Now, with seeing that can make scaling a nightmare. And then you got to think about, what is my waste? How much disk am I really using here versus what I'm paying for? Now, there's tools out there to help you figure this out, right? But let's just say in a human being common sense way. Now, with saying that, the scalability on this could be a nightmare. If we were able to look at it in a different way and say, well, what if I had a way to do a VM that didn't care about my hardware? Wouldn't that be awesome? Oh, wait, there's one more important thing we totally miss here, is the OS, which we all know using Windows, that can get very costly. So, should have brought that into the picture. And of course, maintaining this is another thing. But that leaves most of this being a waste. The network card, the memory. So that means I've got somebody creating VMs, managing VMs, trying to keep up with my applications. But what if I had something a little bit different? What if I had something that just said, you know what? What if you have a server? And on the server, I don't care about your hardware. I only care about the application running on the OS. Okay, well, in a nutshell, that's kind of what a Docker is. It's not a VM. Now I'm going to use the term Docker loosely here. There is Docker, then there's Docker Inc., INC, which is the company. But here we'll only focus on actually what it is. Okay, so let's say I had a Linux machine or Windows. Let's go with Windows because my demo is probably Windows, and it's running on a server. Okay, a bare minimum server, laptop, anything. And then I want to add my application right here. Now I want to add another one right here. Okay, so this isn't going to turn out good. Let's just say app 1, app 2, app 3. Now you get where I'm going with. So now they're all running on this one server. Now, granted, you're going to have to make the hardware match what this server is. But like I was saying, that's pretty much what a Docker is. And I'm going to show you that because I know my drawing and my demos are not very good. But I wanted to do it this way because we're going to break this off into one more thing. So now I have this thing called a container. This container is going to run right here and take a piece of the OS. I know it sounds funny because technically you can't, but that's what it does. And I will show you that here shortly. Now, but with saying that, if we go back to our 3-tier application, we're going to bring it over here. We have a front end, okay? And then we have let's back it up just a little. Our front end may have some API tool, okay? Maybe a search tool. Okay. Now, within that search, I'm going to have security. Okay. And then we're going to have maybe find people. Okay. Well, that's how that could be a search one. Let's say add a person. Okay. And then what we're going to have after adding a person is a deposit. Okay. We'll make this, well, you know what? Let's say get cash. All right. And then we have a cart maybe to check out. Whoops. Which I don't know where you check out at a bank, but boy, that'd be nice. And then we'll say inventory. Okay, and then we'll say something else. Now, the point is this application can have many different layers. If you think about in a programming world, we have this concept saying, oh wow, brain dead. Sorry, but separation of concerns. That's the word. That's the term I was looking for. So with separation of concerns, what that basically means is this application does not care about these. Okay, and each of these are in their own pseudo application, which means this is probably an API. This is an API. This is an API. They're talking to each other. We also had a concept that kind of went away called SOA, which was one of my favorite. SOA is the concept of building everything into web services. Now that went away when we had REST. Now REST can be based upon a separation of concerns. The point is this component should never be dependent on this component. Okay, and when I say component, we'll say application loosely. Okay, because there's more to this. There's a database. You know, it's an application within itself. But this component should never have anything to do with this component. Now, that's in a programming world. So if you think about maintaining an infrastructure world, we will call these services. Okay, but it takes many services to make up the whole picture. Well, that is microservices. Okay, now, that's really all it is. So it's saying that all these should be separated from each other. Now, the cool thing is, what if I have this in Azure? What if I have this in, Amazon Web Services? What if this is a thick client? So the point is they can be many different things, and that's why they can be called services. And each one of these builds together to create what we call microservices. Now, microservices, again, is basically just the concept of having them. I was trying to think of a better way of saying it, but let's say this is in the cloud, that's on-prem. It's a way of managing all these together. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. But in a real simple scenario here, just know that when people are talking about microservices, they're really talking about just their application broke out into components. But again, it's the maintaining of those, and we're going to get to that when we talk about Kubernetes. What if these are actually different Docker containers? Now, wouldn't that be cool? All right, so Kubernetes, what is it? Well, first of all, it is the Greek word for helmsman. Now, that word I know how to spell because I used to be in the Navy. And the helmsman is the person who basically drives the ship. Now, there's a lee, helmsman, and helmsman, but that's totally different decades ago. The concept of Kubernetes, today you'll see it spelled as K. Well, what they do, let me show you how they get that. Is they take the middle 8. Not sure why they came up with this, but I guess it's kind of cool. The middle 8 characters, they removed them and they put an 8 there. So it is, you might see it as this, okay? And that's why. But with saying that, what is it? Now, if we think about one of the cool things we could do, I think I did it just to get it prepared. So if you just Google it, there's a lot of stuff out there, okay? It's open source, which is really cool, and it is designed by Google. Now, what, I guess you could read this, or I can tell you what I know. The Google years ago created a product. I can't think of the name of it, but it's a really cool name. It's something like you'd hear from Dungeons and Dragons type scenario, but then it later became Omega, and then it later became Kubernetes. Now, with saying that, don't ask me if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but what it actually does, you want to think about it as whenever you have your application. So we're going to do a little history again here. So we did Docker. When you think of Docker, let me close this other window, but when you think of Docker, you really want to think about just basic containers, okay? So if I had all my apps in containers, we'll call them nodes, then each of those apps, I'm going to take this concept of microservices, you want to talk Microsoft when I do that, and I'm going to break those out into separations of concerns, or that's the programming term, but I'm going to break them out into their own tiers. So I have a front end. Let's say front FRONT. Say if I have a front end, I think the proper way to do this, put minus in between. And I want it to be Angular JS with Node.js, okay? And then I have a back end. And even though this is a massive app, we're going to use back end. We're going to use MySQL. Now, how do I start deploying this? How do I know how much apps I need? Okay, let's say we're a startup company, but we're a billion-dollar startup company, right? So we don't have just a handful of customers. We've got billions of customers. How do I know what to scale? How do I know what to deploy? Well, I could deploy a couple of nodes, okay? Containers, nodes, tomato. There is a difference, but we won't get into that here. And I may have some information. Now, let me back up. These nodes, I can then start saying, okay, you're a front end. Okay. We'll just say FE. How's that? You're a front end. And we'll make you a front end. And I know I feel like my back end's going to be stronger. So we'll make this a back end. And we'll make these two back ends. All right. So how do I know that those will actually work? You don't, right? Now, well, I mean, you do within a reason. With this, what we can say is say, well, you know what? I want 2 front ends and I want 1 back end. Well, running Kubernetes, it can come in and say, but you know what? You actually need 2 front ends, which is fine. But I can tell you need 5 back ends, and it can create it for you. That's the cool thing. It uses machine learning. Now, that's another cool topic. We'll talk about that later because I love machine learning, but we'll get into that later. The concept is it's able to know and spin these nodes up for you based off what it's learning. Okay. Now, and if a node goes down, a lot of times, especially back in the older days, if a VM went down, a lot of times it was hard for you to know why or what happened or how to fix it. You had to bring it up. Well, guess what? with Kubernetes, it says, oh, this node went down. Bam, let me bring another one back up while you go figure out what happened. It also helps you with your deployment. It helps you whenever if you think about my DevOps, right? My whole application lifecycle. Well, what if I had a way to say, you know what, we need to push out all these updates or all these changes? Well, who's going to do that? How are you going to do that, right? Now, I'm not going to get into that. My concept here is just to let you know what Kubernetes does. Now, if I Googled it, if we just simple Google, see, it pops right up. And it's very simple. It is open source. So if you think about it, it's a container orchestration. So it was kind of, all right, I don't like that word, but it's kind of what we're saying. It's an open source product that you can install and run, but what it really does is it manages your containers. Okay, so the moment y'all been waiting for, a demo. Guess what? We're done. Just kidding. So if you go, what you want to do first is you want to go look for Docker. Okay. Now, the first thing you got to do is make sure, if you remember at the beginning of the video, you want to make sure that your HyperV is installed if you're doing Windows. And you should, if you're running the latest version of Windows, you should have that option for container. You want that as well. Okay, so we'll go here. Now, I can get more detailed on this later, but right now I just want to cut through the intro. How's that sound? So you want to go to Docker. You want to create an account, and what that does, it gives you this option for this what is called a hub. Okay, and we'll talk about that shortly. But you want, well, you know what? A hub is just a place for your images. Now, what is an image? We've never used that word before. An image really is just think of it as a template for your container. Okay, and that's all it really is. So what I can do is I can create a bunch of IIS images. I can deploy my applications on there, and then I can push that up to my hub. And let's say one of my developers come in, instead of starting from scratch, they can just download one of the images that has all the stuff on it they need. Okay, pretty cool. Now, once you do this, you would just download, whenever you download now, it's actually called, I think it's just called the client, maybe, or Windows client, but you'll see it. Let's go here. I've never done this. Well, all right, I guess you could do that. I was going to say, I've never done that. I thought maybe to show me the downloads. But anyway, with saying that, what you can do is once it gets installed, you'll have this little boat looking thing, the little icon. Now, if I click on that, there's a lot of great stuff. All right. The most important thing you want to do is make sure you click on documentation. Now, that takes us to here. I haven't worked through this yet, but there's some really great stuff here. Okay. I definitely recommend taking the time going through this. Then let's go back over here. And if I click back on here, here's some really cool things you need to know. There's your hub that we just talked about. Now, notice it says switch to Linux containers. Well, what does that mean? So if I open up a command line, and if I say Docker info, it tells me about my Docker instance. Notice here, what was OS? So I have one container, one stop, 2 images, and then my architect here is an x86. My OS type is Windows. Okay, I have 8 CPUs, my memory, so forth, so forth. Now, let's say I want to do something in Linux. So if I do that, give the little thing enough time, and let's look at it again. And now if I go look at the OS, I'm now in Linux. Pretty cool, huh? So that's how you can bounce back in between. Now, the truth is, behind the scenes, it's using HyperV to do that for me. Now, for the Linux side, well, let's just kind of play with this. So if I say Docker version, okay, that's my version. Then if I say, let's say Docker PS. So think about PS as your processes and your services, kind of like in Linux, right? So let's try, one of the examples was Docker run hello world. So what it's doing, it can't find the latest, so it's going to go pull it down for me. Now, that's very important, because if I go back to the hub, there are all these images I can pull down. The best thing is they're also certified, which means I went through this testing to make sure that they're good. So I can pull down an image for Postgres, MongoDB, Ubuntu, There's all these other ones. In fact, we're going to maybe pull this one down and look at it. So here's Node. We talk about using Node.js, MySQL. You can use any of these, right? But a lot of those are Linux. What if I want to do Windows? Look at that. I've got Windows Server. Let's do Windows IIS, because you know you can want an IIS server. These are the tags, right? This is how to build, how to run. It even tells me how to set it up. That is pretty cool. So let's try something. What happens if I say, where's my command prompt? I may have to pull this first, but what happens if I say docker run? Now, ignore this for now, but we're going to say, I think it's container. So I think it's container first, which will be 80. Now this may be the opposite, and we'll know quickly because my 80 is used. Okay, and then I want this to be the Linux web server, just because it's a lightweight server. If I can spell it, let's see what that gives us. See, perfect. It knew I wanted this server. So if I go look at this, this tells me all the tags. There's a quick getting started reference. This was what I was going to say now. So the concept too, this creates a virtual drive. And I may do a video later on for how to do that, because how do you get files from your PC to there? Here's the run. Okay, so that's what I was trying to do. But with saying that, let's go back. Did I have any? Yep, see, I couldn't do the ports because I had them reversed. So 8090 is my local machine, and that's the actual container. So let's try it again. Give it a second. It's thinking like, okay, what are you trying to do here? The other cool thing is once that's down, let's give it a second. Like I said, I thought about doing a video of actually downloading an IIS, getting it working. Oh, I'm sorry, it is working, because when this is working correctly, there's no return. But let's go see what happens here. So we said localhost 8090, I think that's, oh, no, that's not what I said. What did I say? 8090. 8090. Look at that. That cool. I have this container running on my machine that I can access. Same thing if I did a SQL, right? I would do the SQL, but it takes a long time to download. But I may actually look at, I think, yeah, I can Control C to get out of that. Now, I think what you can do is, there we go. I was trying to see if I had SQL on my machine. No, I don't. Okay, so Docker. Okay, so maybe next time we'll do it. But the idea is what you can do, and are we running Linux or Windows? Let's just see Docker info. Okay, I want to see my containers if they're running. You can detach. Notice I have it running. So we'll say Docker stop, and you need the ID. But the good news is you don't have to have the whole ID. It's smart enough to know that it's just there. So if I say Docker PS again, I know I'm typing fast because all this is here. Don't worry about what I'm doing. Just go here and do this. Get your version. There's that hello world. You can do a lot of cool stuff. And notice it can be Linux, it can be Windows, and it's smart enough to know the difference. That's what I was getting at. So I kind of hope this at least gave you an introduction of what this was. And I hope you understand that. I mean, here's even examples of how to deploy to Kubernetes, right? Oh, and the good thing about that is when you install this, all you gotta do is say, right here, the option says, do you want to use? Just say yes. Your repository is up here. Think about doing this. Again, I may try to do another video where I actually use a real life case where we put IIS. There are 3 ways you can move files. You can do a share, which I think you saw on that other one. And you can also, like I can share between my local desktop and the container itself. You can also copy those in. There's a way to do that. And then just using the CP command. Let's see if it's Let's see if it just comes up. But you can, yeah, Docker CP command. So if you're used to the Linux world, you can copy that. That would be from your source to your container destination. So you can do it that way too. And don't worry about these commands. Oh, the good news is, let's say if I go to Docker. So here's a list of the commands, right? Or at least the main ones. So CP is your copy, create. You want to create a container. I can see the difference in one. I can run a command in a container. That's very important because there are also flags. I can run my container in a detached mode where it's just running in the background. And then I can interact with it. Like you would want to do that for SQL, right? Microsoft SQL. Kill. I was trying to, oh. If you need to log into somewhere, for an example, if I had to log into my repository, which it will ask you to, then you'd use the login command. Push and pull. Pull is when you pull down from the registry. When I did the web service a few minutes ago, it pulled automatically for me. But you can pull one if you request. So if I go look here, can we get back to the hub? Says Docker dops. Here's our hub. So if I want to just pull it by itself, then I would run this command here. Okay. So let's go back home, and let's say I want a Ubuntu. I can just do this, and what that would do is pull down the image. Let's do the copy thing here. Just make sure I get it right, and then we'll go over here. All right, so I stink at that. Let's try it again. And then download. It's going to download the latest. This one's pretty fast. Okay. And then if I look at my Dockers, okay, I don't have anything running. So what happened? Well, I didn't start it up, right? So then you would just have to find the command to start it up. I can tell you the command is run. Okay. Run will start it up for you. I thought maybe they give you a good demo here, but they don't. Okay. But let's go back to here. No, go back to here. And I know I'm bouncing around because I don't want you to pay attention to what I'm doing. Ironically, I want you to do it from here. Okay. Remove. This removes a container. This removes an image. And if you have any questions, here's the run. That's how I'm going to run a container. So we download the container. Let's see. What is the Docker images? Will give me a list of my images. Okay, Brim2, so we say run, and I should just be able to do this. Oh, misspell it. Oh, let's do it this way.
You're done?
Well, duh, I forgot to put the word Docker. You can't just do run. You have to say Docker. So you can use, a lot of times I'd rather use PowerShell because I can use LS and things like that. But in this case, you have to use, sorry, my keyboard took a second to catch up. So Docker run, and we'll just, Ubuntu, and I'm going to use Bash as my language there. So, that should have ran. Let's do Docker PS. Nope, still didn't run. Docker run. Did I misspell it? UBNTU. Alright, so I'll have to look and see why that didn't work. But with saying that, you get the concept. If you go, I want to show you one more time, just prove my point about the hardware software thing. I think it's in programs. Let's see. Actually, I had a shortcut here. There we go. So program data, Docker, and if I go look inside the container, so if we look in files, you can see this actually looks like a little Windows C drive, right? So if I go to my C drive, it actually took out the things that it needed. Program files, taking out's a bad word, but it actually is a copy of the software, not the hardware. So So I hope that helped. I'll do better demos later. I know the demo was kind of garbage and it didn't teach you anything. But again, the concept is so you can understand what a Docker is, microservices, and Kubernetes, not how to be an expert in this. We'll do that later. Now, I do have a scenario where I do have IIS running against SQL Server, which is pretty cool. And then with saying that, with the SQL Server, you would just access it through your SSMS. Now, most of these containers you would access through a command line, or you would access them through the ports. So anyway, hope all this helps and makes sense. And again, I'll do better demos later for how to use Docker. This wasn't how to use Docker. This was just an introduction to Docker. All right, hey everyone, I couldn't leave you hanging with a Ubuntu thing. So what I need to do is, if you remember, I had it as an image because we downloaded it, right? So I can say Docker images. It's this one. Now I was using the name. Use the ID. Your ID is here. Now the good news is you don't have to use the whole thing. You just start typing it in. So if I say Docker run, I'm gonna have it in this window. So that's what that means. I can do CCC instead of doing the whole thing, as long as I don't have anything else that starts with CCC. Or you can just copy and paste. But just prove a point. We'll leave it like that. And I'm gonna say I want to use bash in this window. There you go. So now the cool thing is, let's make it big. I now have a full-blown Linux machine running on my Windows. So let's start with who am I? I should be root. And where am I? So I'm on the root. So let's see what's all there. So there you go. Is there an opt? There sure is. So I have a full-blown Linux machine running right here on Windows, right? So with saying that, let's go ahead and exit. We're back out, and now I'm back into my Docker world. Now, the other thing I meant to show you is if I went to here, now how I got there was here, right click again and do dashboard. This is your dashboard. If I look here at the beginning of the dashboard, I'm in settings. So let's get out of settings. Let's just start over so you can see. You hit this X to get out, by the way. It shows me everything that I have running. Okay, my containers that are running. This one aired out because of the port 80. That's how I figured it out. I can't use port 80 because I think TDM is using, it's another product, is using port 80. But if I go back in here and go to settings, like I said, I was going to close out of this and show you how to start back. So if I just go here, and if I do dashboard, this is my dashboard. Okay, and then I can click on settings. It's automatically set to start Docker when the Windows starts up. I don't like that. I like to control what's running just because I have so much stuff running. So I did that itself. I don't care about updates, but you might, the resources that are actually being forced to use this. And if you look, it's not a lot, right? 2 CPUs, 2 gigs of memory. Now I'm not an expert on this. I'm sure there's other things you can do with it. This is very important. Let's go browse. I'm not sure I can still that, but let's say C. Program data, and this should be where your files are that we talked about. So Docker, it's Docker desktop, but you get it, right? So those are where your images are. Especially, that's very important with databases. So databases are extremely, whenever a database creates a volume, it's actually saved. So that way you can access it if you spin up other I keep wanting to say VM, but if you spin up other containers, then you can share that database. Now, if you notice, my Kubernetes is running, my Docker's running. So all you gotta do is have it running. I have my enable, so the special features, you can go through and read what these are. I have that enabled. Now, the other thing too is, here's Kubernetes. If you don't want to run it, just uncheck it. I don't really have that many containers, and I'm definitely not using this professional level. So I don't really have a need for it, but it's kind of cool to have it on so I can play with it. And that's all that is. So with saying that, I hope this video was somewhat useful. I know it's kind of bouncing around, but my job wasn't to teach you Docker. My job was to show you how cool it could be, and also just give you an introduction of what it is. Okay, so just keep that in mind. What you definitely want to do is spend time on the getting started. Okay, it has everything you need to know here. And then you also want to spend time on your hub of just downloading stuff. There's so many cool containers here. And obviously do official images, which means they've been tested. But there are just so many cool things you can use. Obviously Tomcat, Java, Jenkins. There's every database you can imagine, including Kibana. Funny, that just came up. The Swarm is what I was telling you before. The Swarm used to be a way to manage your clustered containers before Kubernetes, right? And there may be a way for them to work together. I have no idea. And then, yeah, there's just a lot of really cool stuff. So I recommend just coming in as Joomla. There's WordPress in here also. There's Node.js, CouchDB, there's MongoDB. Just come in and play. Download some of these. If you don't know how to download one, let's say I want to download Mongo Express. I can click on this, and all I can do is this. All right, and then just copy it and make sure my Dockers are running, and then just paste it in there if I can. Well, for some reason I stink at copy and pasting, so let's try that again. Copy and paste, and there we go. Now I'm downloading the latest image. Now to run it, as you saw earlier, I just type in run and type in the ID, and now there are some flags you want to know. There's the idea of running it in the container. There's the idea of running it outside of the container, running it in the back end. I think I mentioned that. Like SQL Server, I can have it running in the back end, and then I can just access it to the port 1433. So anyway, I hope this was helpful, just to prove the point. And if you have any questions, definitely reach out to me. Here it is. So now I have that latest image. So just reach out to me if you have any questions. Just put them in the chat, I guess, the comments area. And yeah, again, so hopefully you learned something. Thank you.